Get into this further with a former Israeli forces spokesman, Doron Spielman. Doron, thank you so much for joining me. So the US president says he'll send Israel everything it needs to finish the job. What's your reaction to President Trump's statement and his threats to Hamas?
Thank you for having me. Well, I can tell you if any country had 251 people taken hostage and 1,200 people slaughtered by an invasion from a terrorist army, they would want nothing more than to defeat that terrorist army and bring their hostages home, which is precisely what Israel has been trying to do since October 8th. And we've had ground campaigns on Gaza. We've tried to defeat Hamas. However, there have been limitations in arms that Israel's experienced, and to have the head of the most powerful country in the world recognize the absolute injustice that there are, as we're speaking, 59 people still beneath the ground, 24 of which are assumed to be alive, and say we will give you whatever means necessary to defeat these Hamas killers. It obviously falls on welcome ears in Israel, and I hope for most people around the world to understand the situation. I would hope, Leanne, that we would hear other world leaders say the same thing. It seems to simply be the right decision. Defeat evil, allow Israel to bring its people home, and make Hamas leave Gaza.
By sending a so-called last warning, Hamas have actually responded and accused Trump of encouraging Israel to break the ceasefire deal. We know this is extremely fragile at the moment. What do you make of this? And is there a chance of this ceasefire breaking down and the war resuming?
We've said from the very beginning, Israel cannot live with Hamas on our border. Any deal that would leave the Hamas terror regime that has attacked and killed thousands of Israelis, that has shattered and ruined the lives of the people of Gaza and destroyed Gaza completely, not to mention diverted all of that money that came in from the Gulf states, from the United States, the UN, into tunnels underneath the ground and held that civilian population hostage. Any deal that leaves Hamas in charge is something Israel cannot live with, which I think is perfectly understandable. And of course, Israel insists on this. And therefore, at this stage of the deal, Hamas is not willing to leave the Gaza Strip, to lay down their arms. Israel has said since October 8th, all Hamas had to do was lay down their arms, give up, return our hostages, and we would never have entered the Gaza Strip. So therefore, we're at the end of phase one, heading to phase two, and there's no sign that Hamas is willing to admit what they did was wrong and to leave Gaza. Until that happens, Israel cannot agree to any situation that would keep a terror regime just a couple miles over our border.
Whilst all of this is actually happening, Israel is sending tanks into the West Bank, and this is happening for the first time in decades. What kind of message does this send to the rest of the world when it comes to peace and negotiating the second phase of the ceasefire deal?
I think that Israel has been very, very clear. Israel has lived with a very complicated situation for many, many years. There are Palestinians and Jews that are living in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. When those Palestinians that are associated with Hamas cross into Israeli territory and gun down families, two young men that were driving their car that stopped at a crosswalk that were killed at point blank range, buses, 5 of which blew up just a few weeks ago, families that have been killed even this week in Haifa, in the middle of Israel, a Jewish Arab city where people were killed, soldiers run over, an old man shot. When this is what is emanating from the West Bank, I think Israel's sending a clear message. Terror will not be tolerated, and we would hope that anyone around the world that wants to understand peace and terror do not go together. In order to have peace, you must have strength to prevent terror. We can see the same thing playing itself out in many other regions of the world. Peace doesn't come by negotiating or being friendly to a terrorist who wants nothing more to kill you. You have to have, on one hand, strength, and on the other hand, hope that strength will establish a situation where ultimately, without terror, we can establish peace. But strength comes first.
Strength comes first, indeed. But President Trump has met a group of recently released hostages at the White House. 5 U.S. citizens are still being held captive by Hamas. Could a stance help or hinder the return of these hostages and the remaining hostages that have been held?
Leanne, it is a great question, and I wish I had the clear answer. All of our hearts break for the people that are in Gaza, and all we want is to bring these people home. And therefore, you're asking the right question, and no one is really sure of the answer. Is it via some type of conciliation that would bring them home? Well, we've done that. We've had a ransom. The first phase was a ransom where we released back into Gaza and back into Judea and Samaria 1,000 Hamas terrorists, 350 of which carried out attacks and had blood on their hands. I mean, that is the cost of trying to bring people home. The second phase requires even more killers and murderers to be released on the street. And so obviously, in the rare chance we would get people back, you're allowing murderers to go out. I think what President Trump is saying is he's clearing the table. He's saying there's a simple formula here. There's a right and there is wrong. It is wrong that Hamas invaded Israel. It is wrong that they took the hostages. And the only thing that is right is that they immediately return them and leave Gaza. It's a very simple answer, and I think that it is what needs to be listened to. Anything else is simply Israel being blackmailed by a terrorist entity so that we can try to pull whoever's left alive, and many of them have been killed, out of the dungeons of Gaza.
I just want to bring you back to another point that we were talking about earlier. And Israel has imposed a total blockade on all goods entering Gaza, demanding that Hamas release the hostages. But since the start of Israel's war on Gaza, at least 46,700 people in Gaza have been killed. This is becoming something that needs to end really quickly. And how do you think that you're going to find peace? Because this is what Donald Trump wants. He wants the killing to stop. He wants it to end quickly. Do you think that you can get to a position where you can negotiate peace?
If negotiating peace means leaving in the same brutal, murderous regime called Hamas, that is responsible for killing Israelis and responsible for those 46,000 Gazans, at least half of whom, by the way, were terrorists, then it is absolutely impossible, because all we will do is leave the same terror entity inside Gaza that will carry out the exact same acts against Israel and terrorize the same Gazan people again. There is no quick fix here. The only fix here is to uproot a problem that has metastasized over decades, that has implanted itself inside Gaza, that has brainwashed the population, has held them hostage, has created the largest underground terror network in any single place in the world, launched the deadliest attack on Israel. The only answer is going to be to uproot that cancer, remove them, and reset the entire area. Nobody wants to have to go through this, but this is what has to be done to start a new life for the Gazan people. I think President Trump is very bold and courageous for making this plan. People are afraid to make change. It's been the same plan again and again and again: appease Hamas, conciliate with Hamas. And the result is that we now have thousands of Israelis dead and thousands of Gazans dead. We have to make the difficult decision, Leanne, to go in and finish the problem. And there is only one way of doing it: unconditionally destroying Hamas. If they remain in Gaza, it is a threat to Israel, it is a threat to the people of Gaza.
Doron Spielman, former Israeli forces spokesman, thank you so much for your insights this evening.
Thank you for having me.